Get your phone.
Well, I learned from a friend that showed me why. Instead of asking why, start asking why not. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're lying in the sun. Bit by bit, the older that we get, the faster it tick, 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 ticks. Time flies. Whoa, whoa, time flies.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Marshfield Old School Times. Happy today to have my good friend, Representative John Black, with me. John, welcome.
Thank you, Lyndall.
You betcha. Again, thank Dennis Beck for our intro song, Time Flies, and Logan Fraker, our producer, director over here behind the scenes. Thanks again, Logan. We're going to have some fun today because John and I have been friends for over 30 years now, and I've got a lot of stories I could tell about him. I probably shouldn't tell them all, but I might tell a couple. And he's going to have some stories for you, too, going back even a little further. John's kind of a quasi-historian like I am. He loves history and loves nostalgia, and if you ask Cynthia, he's got a barn loft full of junk. Valuable articles, excuse me.
Yeah.
And we both kind of have that same spirit. So, John, let's kind of just get started today. First of all, this is the first week of session for the new year. How's that going to go this year?
How's it going to go? Well, I can tell you the first week's gone fine.
yeah. You were in and introduced everybody and welcomed everybody back, and then gavelled out, right?
Yeah, but we have some new leadership in the House. A fellow named Rod Jetton, who's a former speaker and is now the chief of staff for the speaker in the House. Rod was speaker when the Republicans took control of the House.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a great deal of valuable experience.
Yeah.
He has some ideas that we're trying to implement that hopefully will make us a little more productive, a little more efficient. And I'm happy to have Rod on board. And we had several meetings this week trying to set up some of the initiatives that Mr. Jetton is suggesting, and I think it's going to be valuable.
Rod Jetton was the Speaker of the House. He finished the term prior to me coming in, and it definitely had a lot of valuable, assets and attributes that he brought to the House. I think people certainly talked about him, and the Republicans took the majority, or took it. He grew the majority, I guess, in that time period. With, of course, Mike Cunningham served our area at the time. But so yeah, that'll be interesting. It sounds like it's a good thing to have some seasoned leadership there. So
yeah, I think Rod will help a lot.
Yeah. Well, today, what I thought we would do, even though John's not an MHS graduate, his daughter Hannah certainly is, and Alicia, and then has lived here how many years now? 30 plus, right?
Yeah, Cynthia and I have been married just over 30 years.
Yeah.
Of course, we lived here
all
that time.
So he's a native as far as we're concerned now. If you make it that long, you're a native. But he actually grew up just down the road at Strafford, Missouri, and has some fond memories of time spent even in Marshfield in those days and the connections that he had back then. So I thought, it might be a great way for people to get to know their state representative just a little bit better. And we had, former Senator Cunningham on earlier this fall, and again, didn't graduate from Marshfield High School, but you don't have to be on this show. We just want to hear your story, because everybody has a story. And it's sort of like the day I was up at the county courthouse as commissioner, and there was a fella came in there, and a fella from Strafford, and we had mutual acquaintances, John and I, with this gentleman, and we were talking about various things, and I said, "You don't know John Black, do you?" He said, "Well, I sure do." I said, "Well, John's my neighbor and my good friend." He said, "Yeah, know John a long time." He said, "You know that John Black? He's about the smartest man I know." And so we've had a lot of fun with that since then, John, haven't we?
Robert Morgan is a very nice guy, very complimentary, hard worker, been a real asset to our community. He served on Good Samaritan Boys Board for many years.
Right.
On the Stratford School Board. Rob and Alice are great assets for our area.
Yeah. Well, it's always nice to hear a compliment about a friend, and I'm always eager to share that with John and those of you on watching our show today. So, John, let's start at the beginning. That's a good place to start. Let's talk about growing up in Stratford, your folks, your brother. What'd you do in those days growing up in probably one of the best times to grow up, in my opinion, the 50s and 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, to give you perspective, I graduated from Stratford in '70, and my brother Joe graduated the year after that. We moved to Stratford when I was going into the 4th grade, so I consider Stratford the place I grew up.
Where did you live before that?
We lived I was born in Springfield, but we lived in a little town called Lewisburg, up on 65. My mom and dad were in a feed store. After Dad was in the war, and after the war, they settled in Lewisburg and moved to Springfield for a while. He drove Greyhounds and trucks, and then they moved back when I was little, and they had this grocery feed store in Lewisburg.
And your mother's family was from that area, right?
My dad's family is actually from Polk County, just a few miles west of Lewisburg, and my mom's family is from Dallas County.
And her maiden name was?
Keim, K-E-I-M.
K-E-I-M, okay.
Right. And so then we moved to Stratford when I was young, and went to the church in Baptist Church of Stratford my whole youth. And Joe and I mostly would concentrate on playing ball.
Baseball.
Baseball, basketball. Had to run track back then if you wanted to play basketball.
Yeah? Is that right?
Wow. Played basketball, you had to run track. So we did that too. Didn't have football at Stratford back then.
And my cousin Leroy Fraker was a teacher at Stratford in those days.
That was before me.
A little before you? Okay.
Yeah.
Because he'd already came to Marshfield by then.
I guess he had.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Lynn was at Stratford when I first went
Sonny
there.
Lynn?
Sonny Lynn.
Okay. Sonny Lynn graduated from high school with my dad in 1948. His grandfather was B.F. Julian, who was the mayor of Marshfield back in the 19-teens and 20s, somewhere in there. Mr. Julian had lived in the big house on Jackson Street that Alphonse Celeste Smith
I didn't know that.
lived in for many, many years.
Really?
That's the Julian house.
Yeah.
And just down the street, a house or two to the west, was his daughter Ruth Lynn, which Sonny she was Sonny's mother. And then Sonny had a sister, Katie Williams, Jack and Katie Williams, and they lived right next door. So there's two houses there. You can see when you drive by that look similar. But Jack and Katie had some children that all went to school with me and my friends and our generation. Mike Williams was in my class, and there was other brothers and sisters. But anyway, that's the connection there that Sonny Lynn had to, the mayor of Marshfield, and then putting people together, as we like to do.
Yeah, the superintendent then was a gentleman named Gann. A long time superintendent, kind of like they had in Marshfield too back in those days.
Was that Ghan or Gan?
Ghan.
That's what I think. Yeah. You probably had a Mickey Mantle ball card or two in those days, didn't you, growing up? Or
the ones my mom didn't give away.
Yeah, not the ones you bought later in life for a lot more money, but the originals, right?
Yeah, we made a scrapbook, and kind of like I know you've done on some of your cards. We customized them.
Well,
we glued them in that scrapbook.
Yeah.
So I've got a '63 Mantle that was glued in a scrapbook.
But you do still have it.
I do still have it. Yeah.
Of course, my claim to fame on that issue is the Oakland A's 72, 73, 74 went to the World Series, World Champions, and that was about the time times were a-changing in the culture. And ball players from the 60s had hair up over their ears and clean shaven and all that. Yeah, by the early 70s, Charlie Finley out at Oakland let his players all grow beards and long hair.
Right.
Well, of course, we had to have a magic marker and mark on our cards and put hair and mustaches on them. Totally destroyed the cards, but, it was fun back then, right?
I actually thought your Lou Alcindor card was your best card.
Yeah, that's the classic. You can't top that one.
And how did you customize?
Well, Lou Alcindor was a rookie for the Milwaukee Bucks in 1969, and as everybody knows, he was a great college basketball player and played for UCLA. But after his rookie season, and his rookie card had his name, Lucy Lou Alcindor, on there. After his rookie season, when Mr. Alcindor changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as others like Muhammad Ali had done and so forth because of their religion. Well, of course, we had to make sure our card was changed, so I took an X-Acto knife and I made a little score around Lou Alcindor and peeled the top layer off so I could write with an ink pen Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I don't know what that card would be worth today if it was in great condition. It probably wouldn't have been in good condition by now anyway, but it'd be worth $1,000 or $200, or I mean,
Yeah, his rookie
it'd
cards.
it'd be four figures for sure.
You think it is now?
And I'd say it might bring $50 if somebody just absolutely wanted to have the card because of the condition. But anyway, that's the way it goes. So now you guys, where did you move to in Stratford when you first?
Well, that's an interesting story. Tyndall Mills, which a lot of people know, decided they would build not a chicken ranch, but an egg ranch back in the Holman Woods. And I imagine some of your viewers know where Holman is, and most probably do not. But it's basically where Exotic Animal Paradise is. And so back in the woods there, 3 miles off the highway, they built a chicken farm with thousands of chickens, and it was an egg farm. And the purpose was to, raise those eggs. And so if you've never gathered eggs in a 1,000-bird chicken house and put them on a tray and then washed them and packaged them, well, I have. So, if you want to know how that's done, I can help you with that. Yeah. But we didn't stay there too long when we moved into the town of Stratford.
Now, was the interstate in there? Was it, obviously it wasn't interstate yet, but was the highway divided?
It was 4-lane.
They had divided the highway, but then okay.
Yeah. We doctored with Dr. Tommy.
Uh-huh.
And we'd come over here and he'd give us our annual physicals.
Mm-hmm.
And, Stanley's Pharmacy right there on the corner,
Mm-hmm.
if you remember that.
Yeah. Well, Stratford didn't have very much back then.
Stratford had 200 people when we lived there.
Yeah.
When
So
we moved.
you'd have had to gone way on into Springfield, living that close to Marshfield. It would have been handy to come here.
Right.
So you went to school at Stratford, and Joe was a year behind you.
Right.
Now, your mother had a car that was your granddad's that you and Joe kept up until just recently, right? Tell us about that.
I'd be happy to do that. That was my father was on my granddad to buy a new car around 1960. My granddad had a cream-colored 49, I believe the name of the model was Fleetline. That was the model with the long sloped back.
Ford?
It was a Chevy.
Chevy, okay.
Very valuable car today.
Yeah.
Like the baseball card.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandfather, who learned to drive late in life and was fiscally conservative,
Mm-hmm.
went over to the local Chevy dealer, and you've heard about buying top of the line. He bought bottom of the line.
Like nothing on but the radio kind of deal.
Didn't have a radio. and 4-door, 3 on the tree, no radio. Did have a heater.
It did have a heater.
Did have a heater.
That's good.
Did have a heater. And he didn't drive very much. And so when he passed away, my father passed away just a few months after my grandfather.
Yeah.
And so as a result, Mom and Joe and I wound up with a car. And we kept it for many years. If anybody wanted a 4-door Biscayne with 35,000 miles on it.
35,000 miles. It was a 1960 model.
Yeah, we sold it a few years ago. Yeah. Left it in the garage to the point where the brakes froze up and decided maybe we ought to
Right.
do something.
You grew up with and he went to school basically. He was a little older, Roy Blunt, and then Ron Blunt, right?
Roy was a couple years older.
Mhm.
Ron was a year younger than me in my brother's class. So
Went to
we
church.
went to church with the
Mhm.
Blunts, and Dad and Leroy were on the school board. I mean, small town.
Right. And didn't you tell me that, or maybe Leroy told me this? I think Leroy actually told me, but your mother might have even been Leroy's first campaign treasurer or something, or helped him with his campaign.
She was.
When he ran for state representative, which would have been in the late 70s, mid 70s. Yeah.
Yeah. She was church secretary there
Yeah.
at the Baptist church. And so Dad had been the church treasurer. And then after he passed away, Mom was church treasurer and church secretary. So natural for Leroy to ask her to do that.
Sure. So in 1970 or 69, when was it that the basketball team, your team, was really good?
Our team was good. My senior year, we won 20 games. But the year after that, my brother's senior year, they were very good. They were ranked in the top few rankings in their class all year long. And my senior year, the last regular season game we played here in this gym.
Mhm.
And
Was your brother on the team as a junior?
Joe was on the team. And we won. Stratford beat Marshfield. You can ask Dave Replogle or Jerry Miner, but they don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about the next year when Marshfield struggled during the first part of the season.
Yeah.
And then they were playing in the regional tournament, playing against Stratford. I think it was the first game in the tournament because Stratford was heavily favored. I think Stratford was perhaps seated first, and Marshfield, maybe last. I didn't even go to the game because it was so obvious who was going to win.
Yeah.
And
that was 71.
that was 71. And Marshfield won, and then they went to state and did quite well. I can't remember how far they went, but you talk to Dave or Jerry, they won't tell you about that.
Yeah. Bill Lewis would have been on that team. Billy Bob, we called him then, but went on to become a banker at Mr. Lewis's son.
Yeah.
Randy Dameron.
We'd known Dave growing up because in the summertime he went to basketball camps and things like that.
Now, did you play baseball, or did Joe play baseball with some of them guys too, and like Legion ball or something?
We both played baseball. Joe was a good pitcher, left-handed pitcher, and he played Legion ball 2 or 3 years for Marshfield. Noel Thomas was the assistant coach.
Yeah, Jim Trantham would have been the coach.
Jim Trantham was coach.
Yeah.
So we've been around Marshfield.
Been around. That had the connections there.
Yeah.
So you went on to college.
Yeah.
Go ahead and talk. Let's enter that era.
Okay, that was 70.
Yeah.
And Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I went to college. First year, you had a college deferment back then. My second year, they did away with the deferments, and you had the draft numbers. And so the war was still going on.
Yeah. It wasn't starting to, it was coming down a little because the height was the 68 with the Tet Offensive and all that. And Nixon got elected. And
so you'll always remember your draft number.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
Mine was in the low 200s, which was safe. I had friends that had lower numbers that actually, I don't think they were actually drafted either, but they were.
Yeah.
But they were sweating.
Yeah.
And so during that period of time, I went to SMS and was pre-med. Thought I might like to be a physician. And my second year then, I went to see my counselor, asked him how my grades were and all that. He said, well, yeah, your grades are pretty good, but I think you ought to know we haven't put anybody in med school except one Vietnam medic in 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Well, thanks for telling me that. So I was a chemistry major. So based on, it's funny how God works. Based on the fact that I had more chemistry hours than anything else, I transferred to Rolla to pursue a chemical engineering degree. That was my
How long did you go to MSU then?
2 years.
2 years.
They had a
I see.
transfer program.
I see. Yeah. Okay, so you went to Rolla, but this time it was about 72 or 3, and
When I
yeah.
transferred up, graduated in 74, went to grad school a semester, and then went to work.
And where'd you go to work?
Went to work for one of the longest existing businesses in the state of Missouri, since the Civil War and before, actually. Name of the business was called St. Joe Metals Corporation. And that's the company that had mined lead in Missouri for all that period of time. It was a fine company, lived in the metropolis of Viburnum, Missouri.
Viburnum.
You've been to Viburnum.
I've been there. Now, when did you say they started the mine then?
Oh, they started mining at least in the 1850s.
Yeah, right.
I think it was
not long after Missouri was a state, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Back in that period of time, there were also lead zinc mines in southwest Missouri, but those
Down by Joplin.
Those were mined out. But the industry in southeast Missouri still existed, and in fact, in that time, they were the largest producer of lead and zinc, at least in the country and maybe the world.
Yeah. And what predominantly, of course, everything used lead. Lead was used for everything. But even by that time, even by the 70s, what did they predominantly mine it for?
Batteries.
Batteries. Yeah.
Batteries, wire, ammunition, but mostly batteries.
And then at some point, that particular company sold, right?
They did. I worked for 4 years and left. But after that time, they changed ownership. And times were tough. Metal prices were down, metal, lead, zinc, copper. And it sold one private companies now called Doe Run.
Yep. And I just happen to have a little sample here. A little, what would you call that?
Pig.
Trivet. Pig, that's a pig. So, John and I and the families took a little trip down there one time and went to the mine. And so I got this little pig. See, there's Doe Run. So I had that memento. I thought I would share that today. It's kind of a funny story. So there was, I don't know, 5 or 6 of us that went over to see the mine, and we got over there and put the coveralls on and the glasses and the helmet, and here's John and I think Bill Tierney and a couple more, and then Melanie was with me, and she got all dressed up. She was going to go down there, and I got to the door of to the gate of to the shaft, and I'm thinking, how far down is this? And he's like, well, it's
1,000 feet.
Yeah, it's 1,000 feet. I'm like, okay, a quarter of a mile is 1,300 feet. Quarter of a mile, so we're going to be, up toward a quarter of a mile. 3/4 of a quarter of a mile. Now, how far would that be from here to there? And I got to thinking about it. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to go. Of course, Melanie's like, yeah, let's go. I'm game. So John and Bill and Melanie and a couple more went down, and I waited in the truck, I guess. But anyway, that's the way it goes. But that was a fun day. So, so you worked for 4 years. Then what'd you do?
I went to law school.
I bet that was kind of interesting, wasn't it? Did you actually leave work, or did you go to school while you were working?
No, I resigned from the mining company, went to work, or went to Columbia, went to law school. You can go to law school in 2.5 years if you go through summers. And so I did that. And while I was with the lead company, with the mining company, that was a union shop. And I got interested in that line of work. So there was a law firm in Springfield that specialized in that kind of work on the company side.
Right. I was going to say, clarify that, because you got interested because of representing the company with union discussions and so forth, which is kind of interesting. I mean, there's both sides there. You have to have representation.
I ultimately went to work for that law firm after I got out of law school and did lots of labor arbitrations and contract negotiations, and had good relationships with the unions that I was in.
Mm-hmm. Did you live in Columbia when you went to school up there?
Yes.
Then? I see. Then you come right back to Springfield. I bet that was kind of good thing, wasn't it?
Stratford.
Yeah.
Nice to be home.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then you had some daughters along that about that time, right? How many?
Yeah,
Tell them
Cynthia,
about your daughters and
yeah, Cynthia and I between us have 6 girls
yeah.
and no boys.
Right.
They tell me
You got a few son-in-laws though.
I have, yeah. They tell me raising boys is easier, but I wouldn't know.
That's a good answer, actually. That's a good answer because you could have said, and they're right. You didn't, but you don't know. So
I just don't know. So they're all over the country now, all grown, and
yeah, done pretty well too, I think.
yeah. One's a doctor, one's a lawyer.
One doctor, lawyer, and a school supervisor, principal.
Elementary principal.
Yeah,
One works for the feds.
Yeah,
For the DEA.
Yeah. So you went to work in Springfield for a law firm, and then I guess you sort of got acquainted with MSU again, right?
Yeah.
And that's about the time that we met, I think, somewhere early 90s.
Yeah, I went to work full time for the university in '95.
Okay, yeah.
I was actually their first in-house general counsel.
You'd been doing contract work for them.
We'd been outside counsel for a period of time, and I don't know if you remember the circumstances of the construction of the Performing Arts Hall,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very nice facility.
Absolutely.
A real asset to the community. But the president and the board got crosswise over that, and a state audit resulted. And the state audit recommended that they have in-house counsel, and I was fortunate enough to get that job.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 12 years.
12 years. Something else big happened during your time as attorney. I know, and I learned a little more about this after I went to the State House, but SMS became MSU. Tell us about that.
Well,
That was a huge deal. It was really a huge deal.
gigantic deal for the area.
Yeah, and for the state. Yeah.
Yes. Your University of Missouri system wasn't real keen on that idea that some other institution had a statewide name.
Yeah.
Missouri State.
Right.
And they frankly opposed it for several years. But finally, with the help of some local legislators here, it got passed, and so now there are 2 institutions in Missouri with recognizable statewide names: the University of Missouri and Missouri State. And yes, I was there during that period of time, and it was interesting.
Yeah, and I think our predecessors, Mike Cunningham, Jay Wasson, Dan Clemens, were all very helpful in pushing that legislation, and then several, of course, in the Springfield area as well.
They certainly were.
Yeah. So that happened around 2005 or 6, somewhere in there, 4 or 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And then a couple years after that, you made the switch to go to City Utilities. Tell us about that.
Well, CU, most people know CU's a community-owned utility in Springfield. What most people don't realize is City Utilities operates more utility divisions than any other municipal utility in the country.
I didn't even remember that. Yeah.
They operate electricity, natural gas, water, broadband, and the bus service.
Right. Yeah.
So it was a very interesting job, very diverse job. Fit well with my engineering background.
Yeah,
actually.
Absolutely.
Great outfit to be with. Very thankful to have been there too.
And then there were a lot of changes going on with the environment in that time period. I know you guys had to switch from coal to natural gas on your power plants and stuff like that, right?
There's a big push to do that, still is.
Yeah.
And of course, some of us think that movement is a little overdone.
But the scrubbers had to be added. And you told me one time that the air coming out of the James River Power Plant was cleaner than the air going in. At one time.
The environmental equipment on a coal-fired power plant does an excellent job with regard to the products of combustion. What it doesn't have anything, cannot reduce, is the carbon dioxide that's released in the combustion of coal. So Springfield had two coal burning power plants, one in James River, the old one down on the river that is really just a picturesque site, constructed Lake Springfield at the time, provide cooling water in the 50s for that power plant. Actually put Springfield on the map from having an industrial capacity, that old James River power plant. And it was old enough when all the environmental regulations came along that the decision was made that it would just be better to shut it down. But the newer power plant in the southwest part of town with the new unit, actually CU has one of the last coal burning power plants that will ever be built in the United States, in my opinion. It was commissioned, opened, I think, in 11. And so that facility still burns coal. Very clean plant, except, of course, for the CO2 that is the greenhouse gas issue that we're facing today.
Gotcha. Well, those were definitely times were changing, I'm sure, as you helped navigate all of that with CU. Now, while you were there, was there any talk? I know, going way back to the 70s, when there was talk about building a lake on the James River, and then they ended up with a pipeline at Stockton. I know that was before your time at CU, but what was the last discussions that you were involved with on what they were going to do about water in the future? Was that, because I know the watershed does continue to keep dropping as the Ozarks continue to add more population and so forth.
You're right. I wasn't with the utility then, but they called it the County Line Dam. Remember that? That's
County Line Dam.
County
That's
Line
right.
Dam.
Yeah, big deal.
Big deal. And of course, the idea is to serve Springfield and the area with its long-term water requirements. But instead, they built a pipeline from Stockton, which brings water from Lake Stockton and Fells Lake, and then it's cleaned and the, of course, the lake Stockton is owned by the government, by the Corps, so I had to get permits to take an allocation from Stockton. While I was there, we were able to get a second allocation, and that actually will serve Springfield for many years.
Okay.
But they're still looking for what to do when those allocations are inadequate. It could be 50 years maybe, but something like water, you kind of have to look ahead.
Right. What about the, I've even heard the aquifer continuing to drop, like for cities, the cities that you still use wells, which a lot of the small towns do. Is there any discussion about what to do there or what they might have to do down the road?
That's a problem.
Yeah.
And some of the communities surrounding Springfield that are on wells have had trouble in dry years. And there is a big effort now to combine the cities, the small cities, specifically including Joplin's on wells.
Right.
They have a water supply in the future, and that's an ongoing effort. And again, federal government is key, whether or not they allow additional allocations from the lake.
Like damming up another river down that direction or something like that.
Or an allocation from Stockton or Truman.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got you at City Utilities in the 2000s by this time. You and Cynthia are married. You're enjoying your life in Marshfield, and she's got a thriving law practice. And then about 5 years ago, maybe close to 6 years ago, you made the decision to retire. And tell us about that. And I can recall a conversation. A lot of people may have thought that I recruited you to take my spot in the House. I didn't recruit you, but we did have a discussion one day. You came to me.
We had discussions more than one.
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
And I was able to. I'd reach retirement age. Could if I wanted to.
Yeah.
As you know, our recollection of these conversations are not exactly the same. Actually, I would say my predecessor in the State House did recruit me, but he won't admit it. I guess he's kind of ashamed of the job
No,
his
no,
successor's
but
doing.
you hadn't indicated you were going to retire, and quite frankly, the salary difference between a state representative and an attorney for city utilities is such that I would have never tried to recruit you because I knew that you couldn't make that switch. But when you did tell me finally that you were thinking about retiring, I might have planted some seeds at that. Okay. But that was kind of late, actually. You were going to retire. I mean, I think when you told me it was mid fall and you were going to retire in January or something. So it wasn't like you'd planned it for a long time.
No, I retired
Yeah.
first day of February.
Yeah.
Of the year I ran.
Yeah.
And immediately went into campaign mode. Had a lot of good help
Well,
from.
that's right. And it was a pleasure and a lot of fun. And it was, believe me, there's a little bit of a responsibility to a state representative or a state senator or any elected official to think about who could replace you, because you want people to carry on with what, you might be involved with. We had some things going on here that you certainly wanted to see someone that had similar views and certainly similar, party affiliation and so forth. So when you did indicate that you would be interested, it made it really easy for me to get in and help, and it's been a pleasure watching you follow me. And you're going to find this out too in another couple of years when you term out, that you're kind of a has-been. Once you're out, so it's but with you, I feel like I still have a connection. If I want to make a call or give you some advice, I can do that. Not that you maybe take it or use it, but
I always appreciate any comment you might have.
Anyway, well, that's great. Why don't you talk a little bit about your time in the House and the committees you're involved with? I know the budget is a very, very important committee, and tell us a little bit about all that.
Yeah, that is an interesting discussion, and I enjoy having that with people who were there before me, you and Mike particularly, because it seems to me that we waste an awful lot of time up there now by not agreeing on things that should be agreeable. And my understanding from the folks who've been there before me is it hasn't always been that way.
It's different.
And so the last, I'll say 3 years, I'll be in my 6th year. I'm in my 6th year now, just started my 6th year. The Senate particularly has had trouble getting along with itself.
Yeah.
There's a group of what I would call traditional Republicans, and then there's obviously some Democrats. About 1/3 of both houses are Democrats, similar to when you were here, right?
Right.
Then there's another party, ultra-conservative party in the Senate, and the last 3 years, that combination has managed to really slow things down. And so we can pass just about whatever we want to pass in the House, as you could when you were there, because of the supermajority or the close to supermajority, the 2/3 margin we have in the House. But then it doesn't do a lot of good if it winds up being held up in the Senate. I believe, I don't know if Senator Cunningham discussed that at all when he was on your program, but I think he was a little frustrated about it at the end of his career.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of factors that you can maybe attribute this to, but one of them is certainly social media. Even when I got elected in 2010, Facebook was just really getting started. As a matter of fact, Melanie had to help me set up a Facebook account to help use it for the campaign work. And it was just it wasn't really mainstream yet. And by the time I went out at 18, you had Twitter, you had all this other social media in addition to Facebook, which, as we all know, has just, monopolized our whole nation in the way we communicate. And in many aspects, they're all great tools, very good tools. And we probably have a more educated society today than we did 10 years ago or 15. because of these tools. But on the other hand, we also have a lot of things that we do that is not helpful. I mean, especially I think with the younger generations and the way, and it goes right on up to national politics. I mean, you know, the instant diversity or that's not diversity, diverse opinions that we have on television, on all of our news shows. It's just really sad that we have all of that today, and we can't sit down like, even without being political, in the 90s when Newt Gingrich had the Contract for America and Clinton was president, they got together and they made that work, and it was helpful, and it took Clinton's signature on that stuff. I mean, they had to make it work to get the economy rolling in the 90s. And they did those kinds of things. President Reagan said, "I'd rather have someone with me 80% of the time than an enemy with me 80% of the time than a friend that was never with me," or something like that. I mean, we just seem to have lost a lot of that, and that's what you're dealing with now. That we started to deal with it some at the end of my term, but it wasn't like that.
I think it's very detrimental.
Yeah.
Certainly in politics and probably in other spheres as well.
Mm-hmm.
The ability of somebody to say something anonymously that is very hurtful to another person, that much of the time is not factual,
right,
based on incomplete information, or sometimes just made up to be mean. That doesn't help anybody.
Right.
And we have several people in the legislature who are, in fact, most probably, either they monitored themselves or they have folks monitored for them, and so they're always conscious of it. I do not have a Facebook account. I do not have a campaign webpage. One of the few probably. But I have friends who can tell me if I'm messed up or if I'm okay. And I don't need somebody anonymously who I don't even know to offer their opinion when, again, it's likely based on inaccurate facts.
Yeah. You've been very fortunate there, but a lot of that's because of who you are. I mean, character matters. And I was pretty fortunate as a rep. Now, when I took the state health department job for 4 years, I took a beating. But I took the beating from the liberal media that was looking for anything to go after the governor on or his team. And I understand that, and that's part of that, comes with the deal. But at the same time, that was being fed by people with lots of money. I'm not talking about, Marshfield, Missouri money. I'm talking about St. Louis, big money from even outside Missouri that wanted certain things their way and didn't get it. And so, somebody had to be the fall guy or the scapegoat, which I understand that too. But, money still controls the world. But you've been very fortunate and very blessed, but it's because of who you are and how you carry yourself. And people, I can tell you for a fact, in Jeff City, you've got a reputation as well, as good as anyone up there, if not better than most. And as a man of principle, character, faith, so forth. And that helps a lot to counteract some of that kind of stuff that goes on with those people that don't live that kind of life, and they open themselves up to some of that,
Well, thank you. But at the end, there is the influence on many people, I would say, particularly in the Senate, because there are fewer senators, of course, and they are more powerful. Mm-hmm. The House, as you know, Lyndall, doesn't have the filibuster. The Senate does have the filibuster. Mm-hmm. So just a few people can shut the place down. Yeah. And those people are more susceptible, I think, to outside influences because, with power comes money.
That's right.
And those kinds of influences. Mm-hmm.
I would also add that the majority of the 163 state representatives and the 34 senators are good people.
Absolutely.
And they're up there. Their hearts are right. They're trying to do the right thing on both sides of the aisle. I mean, we may not all agree in principle on things, but They're good people, but you've got about 10%, in my opinion, you got about 10% in both chambers that are really in it for the attention because they want to further their political career or they're influenced by the money or whatever it might be. And that's what's really sad.
And it's not that anybody's putting money in their pocket. I
No.
mean, our
Yeah.
ethics laws, as goofy as they might be, have pretty much put an end to that.
Yeah.
But it's the circumstance where somebody wants to move on to a statewide job,
right.
And particularly in the Senate, 10 or 20% that don't approach the job like the other 80%
Right.
can really create a problem.
It really can. And yeah, they don't put money in their pocket, but if they, they're making $35,000 a year and they put $1 million in their campaign account, you can do a lot with that campaign account that, help to get you elected, certainly, but not that you're going to use it at home for personal things.
Because you can't.
No, you can't, and that's pretty clear. But just being able to, travel and do the things that you do to get elected, and it's just a sad situation compared to what probably it was years ago. However, if you go back and look in the early days, the 60s, 70s, the 80s, there was a lot of corruption and there was a lot of, you had a lot of control by certain people because there weren't term limits and they would be in there for years and there was no way to really get them out. And so I guess every generation's dealt with it in some form or fashion.
We should probably make clear that neither your campaign account nor mine has ever approached
No,
the figure you mentioned.
no, a few thousand maybe, but
you're right, and I know you feel the same way.
Yeah.
But one of the wonderful blessings of serving, in addition to being a public servant to the folks that you're trying to represent, is the relationships you make with other people who are trying to do the same thing with the people they represent. And many of your good friends that you made when you were there are now my good friends.
That's right.
Because they're still around in a capacity or another. And I've made this wonderful friends, and I know you did too.
And you do have a common bond. I mean, it's really exhilarating to sit in that chamber the first time and look around and go, I'm doing something that not very many people get to do.
It's
and
a blessing,
it really is. It's hard to describe it, but and again, it's not for the money at the salary that we're paid. But tell us about the budget committee, and what you're working on and how that works, and a little bit how important it is actually.
Yeah, you recommended that I try to get on budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I did try to get on budget my first year. Speaker Elijah Hart at that time put me on budget. I've been on budget ever since. And thankfully, budget is a little more immune from politics than what we call the policy bills. And so as a result of being on budget, most of what little impact I've had has been through service on budget. Mm-hmm. And it's a process that is very time consuming. And I know when you recommended that I try to get on budget, you told me it would be a lot of work and a lot of time, and it is. But I
also knew that you could do it and would do it because you're a very studious type person, and that obviously you have a track record for that with your education, your schooling, and the jobs you've had before. I quite frankly am not that studious, and I'm not that determined to sit down every night and go over the budget like you would, like I knew that you would. So it was a great fit.
So I've been on that committee for the whole time. I've been on education. I've been on utility committees based on my background, judiciary. But budget is where I have wound up focusing the last term or two. And also I'm the chair of a task force that was statutorily established a few years ago on substance abuse, substance abuse prevention treatment. And we've held hearings, and we are issuing a report right now, as a matter of fact, with regard to trying to get a handle on what the state's doing with regard to that very sincere problem, how we might address it better. So that's something where I'm putting some effort to.
You were very helpful as I was navigating through the new marijuana laws in Missouri. You were very helpful and very supportive of what we were trying to do as regulators to keep it, well regulated and contained, and not let it get out of hand like some other states have. And certainly, as you know, I've appreciated you for that, and other good friends up there. And quite frankly, because of the legislation we had, or the legislators we had during that period, the medical program that we put together was a well regulated program. Now, I'm not there anymore. Now they have recreational. It's a whole other animal. And but the one thing that I still would encourage all the legislators to do is to be sure and keep it tight and contained, and don't let it become the Wild Wild West out there like other states, because that would go definitely 360 degrees away from, or 180 degrees, I guess, away from what you're trying to do with the Substance Abuse Committee.
Right. I think so too. A related issue to that is something that we call IP reform.
Yeah,
Initiative petition
exactly,
reform.
exactly.
For example, you mentioned recreational marijuana. Recreational marijuana passed in the urban centers in this state by very large margins. And the rural area of the state, like Webster County, turned it down by a wide margin.
Yeah.
But the fact that the urban areas had such a margin outweighed the fact that most of the state voted against it. But it's the law.
Right.
So that's another issue that we've tried to deal with the last few years, to give the rural areas a little more voice in the initiative petition process. Things change. The last couple of years post-COVID, the federal government has pumped a ton of money into the state. Most of us would say, are you thinking about that federal deficit when you do that kind of thing? But we've got the money, so we need to spend it wisely, and we have. But that money is going to run out this year. And fortunately, we've been able to use it to help our area.
You've done some big major capital projects, and with roads and bridges and so forth, and things like that would have never been able to get done.
That's right. That one-time money.
Yeah, one-time money.
Is what we call it. And, the sewer system here in Marshfield that we're able to implement was part of that one-time money to link the new overpass with the city wastewater system. The mental health clinic that's going to go in, the girl's going to put in here in Marshfield, some mental health clinics in Springfield. All that's one-time money that's being built. So we made an effort to try to use that money wisely, and I think we have. But that's going to dry up, and the budget's going to be more like it was when you were there.
Right. Which I think the last year I was there, the budget was around $30 billion, and now it's the last year or two it's been 50 plus, right?
45, and now over 50 the past year.
And so, as you say, it's because of the federal money that came in after COVID. But one way to look at that, though, that is tax money. I mean, it's money that's been paid in by taxes.
Right.
And if they're going to give it away, we might as well get our share and take advantage of it at this time while we can, because it's about gone.
And the truth of the matter is, Senator Blunt made sure we got our share.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And Roy needs to be recognized for that.
That's right.
And same thing for broadband.
Yeah.
Mental health, substance abuse. A lot of that money we can thank Senator Blunt for.
That's right.
He's gone. It's one-time money. A lot of it's going away. There's still some continuing money.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
John, when you leave in 2 years, which this is your final term. Well, you've got this year, and then you would file this year for the next term, right?
This is my third term.
This is your third term. You're finishing the second half of your third term. When you leave and you term out, what do you feel will be your legacy?
I don't know. What do you think yours was?
You were waiting for that. We didn't pre-plan that. Well, all I can tell you is this. As far as the big achievement, there's no question about the fact that when I ran for office, people would ask me, well, what do you want to try to accomplish. I said, well, I can tell you one thing: Marshfield needs another overpass, and that I would make that casual comment, and had long discussions with then Representative Cunningham about it, and Senator Cunningham when he got elected, and we tried to strategize and figure out a way that we could try to get MoDOT to help get us one, So we began those discussions, and here we are, 12 years, 13 years later, and we have one. And the city of Marshfield are the ones that voted to extend a tax that was already in place to get one. No question about that. But I think Senator Cunningham, because of his leadership and my nudging him, we were able to get MoDOT to contribute and participate and made it work. So, and then I will say, you've done the same with the sewer system, because until that sewer is upgraded in town, specifically in that part of town, there couldn't be much development, and you've been able to accomplish that in your time. So I'm proud to know that we worked side by side to accomplish that.
I've had that question asked before, and I know you have
Mm-hmm.
too. And anybody that's been there has to say, I'm thankful that I was able to participate in these successful efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Mike's case, as a senator with the overpass, that might have been kind of a unique effort.
Mm-hmm.
But in the House side, it doesn't work that way.
That's right.
We all have to work together.
Right.
And I'm happy to have been on the positive end of some of those capital projects, some more money for education, Missouri State,
Right.
OTC, some of those things, and hopefully the substance abuse effort that we're engaged in now will help some people.
Yeah, and that's so important, and we see every day out here, even in Marshfield, Webster County, the problems that are still out there, and every day we had a fella hit the corner of our building here a couple of weeks ago under the influence, and it was in the Marshfield paper this week. Everybody read it, I'm sure. Fortunately, it didn't hurt the building. It kind of scratched it, and there wasn't any students around at the time or kids. But I mean, it's a real problem, and I think even though it was a hard time in my life to take on that medical marijuana position, I'm proud that we were able to keep it, as I said, as regulated as we did, and hopefully the state will continue to recognize that there's still people under the influence can be a big problem.
The other thing we got to say with regard to service in the legislature, as you very well know, is the families. Melanie, Cynthia,
Right.
the incredible support.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't have done it without
You can't
them.
do it
No.
otherwise, or you can't do it well. I mean, it's hard. I hate to be away from home.
Right.
Basically,
is.
5 months a year, but that's part of the deal, and you know it when you sign up.
Yeah. And being a part of the supermajority and the things we did to continue to strengthen life and strengthen Second Amendment rights and all those things that are part of our principles of our party, it was rewarding as well. Tax cuts, along with being able to get some of the things done we wanted to, that it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, but well, I guess we're out of time. Logan showed up, so John?
I'm sure he's just been glued to the broadcast.
Well, John, I appreciate you coming today. I hope all of you out there in the cloud land appreciates John and the job he does for us. I can tell you, I've always said John's sort of like Jimmy Stewart going to Washington. He's a gentleman. He's well respected up there in Jeff City, and you should be proud that he serves our community in representing us in Jeff. And I would encourage you, if you have any questions or concerns, to contact his office. That's what they're there for. He's got a guy named John that does a great job as his assistant, and be happy if you have any questions or concerns or ideas for him. I'm sure they would be happy to hear from the constituents. So
John.black@house.mo.gov.
there you go.
Thank you, Lyndall.
Thanks.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
see y'all next week. Thank you.